It's October 2015, a cool autumn day. John Brennan receives a strange phone call. It appears to be from an unknown number. He hesitates for a second before answering.
Hello?
John Brennan?
Who's this?
You loser.
If John Brennan weren't John Brennan, this might have sounded like nothing more than a prank call. But John Brennan is one of the most powerful men on Earth. He's the director of the CIA. The US government classifies this call as part of a larger conspiracy involving identity theft, the harassment of government officials, and cyber terrorism. Whoever made that call would eventually pay a very high price for the trolling. Across the Atlantic, in a house in the West Midlands of England, a 15-year-old boy sits alone in his bedroom. The phone is still in his hand. He can't believe what he just did. He goes by the name Kraka. He likes smoking weed. In fact, he's high right now. He's also the leader of a hacking group known as Crackers with Attitude. Together with his crew, he embarrassed and terrified America's national security establishment. They leaked the personal information of police officers, FBI agents, and Department of Justice employees. They passed highly classified documents to Julian Assange. They became some of the most infamous hacktivists in the world. And the craziest part? Most of it, they did just for the trolls. This is their story.
This was political.
Teenager
Cybertext.
hijacked the computers of several.
The hacking group Anonymous.
Crackers with attitude.
The year is 2008, Virginia. Another teenager who goes by the online name Default is living a pretty normal American life. He loves football, video games, and his dog. He often argues with his father, who works for the government. At one point, Default starts experimenting with video game exploits. It's his first taste of making computers do things they were never supposed to do. It's exciting, powerful. He becomes obsessed with learning everything he can about how computers work and how to make them do incredible things. 2008 is an amazing time for decentralized hacktivists. Anonymous is at the height of its power. If you manage to get into their secret chat rooms, you could watch their operations unfold in real time. Young Default is fascinated. To him, Anonymous represents pure digital freedom. Through chaos, they prove that you can make the entire world pay attention without ever leaving your bedroom. Some of Anonymous's operations are political. Others exist purely for trolling. Driven by this new sense of power, Default wants to learn everything there is to know about hacking. He starts breaking into random websites simply to see if he can. After spending enough time in anonymous chat rooms, he begins to think the entire movement is cringe. The chats are full of federal agents, people keep getting arrested, and it's impossible to know who you can trust. Anonymous has become so massive that verifying members is nearly impossible. There are constant internal conflicts, betrayals, and data leaks. Because it's the only hacktivist group the media really knows about, Anonymous ends up taking credit for the work of smaller, more sophisticated hackers. The whole scene is a complete mess. So Default begins reaching out to smaller hacker groups. One of them is called AnonSec. They describe themselves as anti-anonymous. But much like Anonymous, they carry out hacking operations that are sometimes politically motivated, and sometimes just for the laughs. AnonSec is far more technically advanced, and Default quickly becomes a much better hacker. The group controls a botnet. A botnet is essentially a massive network of infected computers that someone controls remotely. Those machines can be used to spread malware across the internet, growing the botnet even larger. Or they can all be directed at a single server to overwhelm it in a massive cyber attack. While exploring AnonSec's botnet, Default becomes curious about the computers they've compromised. He discovers that one of them is a server belonging to a Canadian medical school. Unexpectedly, he gains direct access to the university's financial records. He pulls up a list of students who owe the school money. The total outstanding balance is $9.4 million, and at the very bottom of the page, there's a single button: delete all. How could he possibly resist pressing it?
Some of those people would probably be happy to see their debt erased forever. If you look at the records, some students owed around $70,000. Others owed well over $100,000. That's life-changing money. You know what I mean? For many people, it's a debt that follows them for decades. So, I just deleted it all. I opened a shell, sent everything to /dev/null, and wiped it out. Once something goes to /dev/null, it's gone.
Normally, student loan databases are backed up in multiple locations. There are real-time backups, offline backups, and usually even paper copies of the signed loan agreements. But at that moment, Default truly felt like he had made a difference. More and more of his hacking was no longer driven by curiosity. It was driven by a desire to help people. In 2014, bestiality was still legal in Denmark. Most of Europe, including Germany, the United Kingdom, and Sweden, had already banned it. As a result, Denmark became a destination for people seeking exactly that. For years, Danish animal rights activists had tried to draw attention to the problem. They referred to the facilities as dog brothels. Default and his group launched DDoS attacks against websites promoting bestiality. They also posted evidence of animal sexual abuse on Twitter. The information spread across the world. Public outrage exploded. Anonymous quickly claimed responsibility for the attacks, something that deeply frustrated Default. But in the end, it worked. More and more people learned about Denmark's dog brothels. They talked about them online. They organized protests. The issue eventually reached the Danish parliament. In April 2015, Denmark finally outlawed bestiality. During this time, Default continued improving his hacking skills. He also became an early believer in Bitcoin. Over the years, he accumulated more than 1,000 Bitcoins. Today, that fortune would be worth roughly $70 million. He kept the entire wallet on a hard drive in his bedroom. Default also knew he had made powerful enemies. As a result, he became almost paranoid about operational security. He never connected to his own home Wi-Fi. Instead, he used a satellite antenna to connect to the free Wi-Fi of a small kebab shop nearly a mile from his house. Every connection was routed through Tor. Whenever he shut down his devices, he made sure they were fully encrypted. Every time he turned them back on, he had to wait nearly 30 minutes for the drives to decrypt. For the most part, he told nobody what he was doing. He knew he had everything to lose. But in the end, it wouldn't be enough. Now let's go back to May 2013. A 29-year-old intelligence contractor working for the US government also has everything to lose. He owns a home in Honolulu. He has a loving girlfriend, and he earns more than $200,000 a year. But he has uncovered a secret, one too big to keep. The United States government has built the capability to spy on almost every man, woman, and child on Earth who has ever touched a computer. And this man had unknowingly helped make that system possible. The truth haunts him. He's horrified that his own government is violating the civil liberties of millions of innocent people. He knows that revealing this information to a lawyer, a judge, or even Congress would be considered a serious federal crime, one that could cost him the rest of his life behind bars. He's terrified he'll never see his girlfriend again. He has no idea what will happen to her if he goes through with it, but he knows he has no choice. For months, he secretly gathered evidence, and now, he's just uploaded the final documents. He tells his employer, the US government, that he needs a few weeks off to receive treatment for epilepsy. It's the perfect excuse to leave the country without raising suspicion. He chooses Hong Kong. He believes it's one of the few places in the world that values freedom of speech enough to protect him from the US government. There, he meets journalists Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald. He hands them proof that what many had dismissed as conspiracy theories was, in fact, real. Edward Snowden becomes one of the most important whistleblowers of the modern era. Snowden's revelations shock the world. They ignite a global debate over privacy, government surveillance, and national security. For Default, Snowden's story changes everything. It forces him to look much more closely at how governments really operate. He refuses to sit back and allow himself to be watched. Instead, he wants intelligence officials to experience what it's like to be the ones under surveillance, to have their own private information collected, stored, shared, and ultimately, used against them. Default eventually joins Crackus with Attitude, a hacking group founded by Kraka, the teenager who's almost always high. Leicestershire, England, 2015. A rundown housing estate on the outskirts of a quiet former mining town. There's almost nothing to do here except get high or spend hours on the internet. 15-year-old Kraka does both. He's furious about government corruption, mass surveillance, and above all, US involvement in the Middle East. He decides to do something about it. One of his first targets is James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence under President Obama. Clapper is one of the most powerful figures in the entire US intelligence community. Yet his phone number and personal address can be found with nothing more than a simple Google search. That's all Kraka needs. Using that information, he hacks Clapper's personal email account. He posts proof of the breach on Twitter, catching Default's attention. Then he manages to reroute calls from Clapper's home phone to the Free Palestine movement. Even Edward Snowden would later single out James Clapper, accusing him of lying under oath before Congress. Kraka and Default are furious. Along with several loosely affiliated members of Crackers with Attitude, they decide to go after even bigger targets inside the US intelligence community. Their goal isn't money, it's humiliation. They want to prove that these powerful officials aren't nearly as untouchable as they seem. At the very top of their list, CIA Director John Brennan. Just like Clapper, Brennan has left enough personal information online to practically expose himself. Kraka finds Brennan's publicly listed phone number and discovers it's a Verizon account. He calls Verizon's internal support line, pretending to be a technician who needs help with a customer's account. The support representative asks for his employee ID. Kraka invents one on the spot. Somehow, it works. Within minutes, the Verizon employee gives him access to Brennan's account information. He now has Brennan's account number, PIN, and recovery email address. Once you collect enough pieces of personal information from different sources, taking over someone's online accounts becomes surprisingly easy. That's exactly what Kraka does. He resets the password to Brennan's AOL email account. Inside the inbox, he finds Brennan's personal cell phone number. He shares it with Default. Together, they begin relentlessly calling and texting the director of the CIA. Not just him, his family too. John Brennan is stunned. Sure, it might only be a prank, but how could he possibly know that? At the time, no one knew who was behind the attacks or what they were planning next. For a while, Brennan is forced to go into hiding while security around him and his family is dramatically increased. But that's only the beginning. By compromising Brennan's email account, Kraka also gains access to classified government documents. At first, he posts screenshots on Twitter. Then he asks himself one question: what would Snowden do? Instead of dumping everything online, he contacts WikiLeaks. Julian Assange himself expresses interest. In October 2015, WikiLeaks publishes the documents. Among them is Brennan's 47-page SF-86 security clearance application, the highly confidential form required to obtain top-secret government clearance. The document reveals deeply personal information, including Brennan's past criminal history, psychological evaluations, previous drug use, and other details that almost nobody would ever want made public. WikiLeaks also releases emails containing recommendations from the Bush administration on how the president should approach the Middle East. There are even internal communications from the Senate Intelligence Committee discussing ways to make future interrogation methods appear legal and acceptable. The breach ultimately costs the CIA an estimated $15 million in damages and relocation expenses. Several intelligence operatives are forced to disappear and relocate, without ever knowing that in reality, there was never an immediate physical threat against them. The story explodes across the world. People are shocked by one simple fact. Hacking the CIA director's personal email had been ridiculously easy. But Crackers with Attitude aren't finished. They continue releasing more and more sensitive information. They compromise the account of the FBI deputy director. Then they discover databases containing the personal information of roughly 9,000 Department of Justice employees and 20,000 FBI agents. They leak it all. Next, they gain access to the Department of Justice's automated inmate database, containing records on prisoners across the United States. They even look up imprisoned hackers like Jeremy Hammond and publish their records online. One agency after another is thrown into chaos and public embarrassment. Did these teenagers really believe they were going to get away with it? Kraka knows he's made some incredibly powerful enemies. He understands there will be consequences. He just has no idea what those consequences will be. Meanwhile, Default has spent years obsessing over operational security. He's always been paranoid, always careful, but eventually, even he lets his guard down. In the end, Default made one simple mistake. He started dating one of his friend's ex-girlfriends. According to Default, he asked his friend beforehand if he was okay with it. His friend said it wasn't a problem, but it was a lie. One evening, the two of them were drinking and chatting over Xbox Live. Default talked about things he never should have shared. At the time, he never imagined his friend would do anything with that information. He didn't even think his friend believed him. Today, however, Default is convinced that this friend was the one who turned him in. When the FBI raids your home, they don't knock politely. Agents burst into Default's bedroom just as his computer was finishing its decryption process. Assault rifles were pointed directly at his face. They dragged him out of the room. Before the drives could encrypt themselves again, investigators copied the contents of his hard drive. They seized every piece of equipment they could find. At that moment, Default knew it was over. But the hardest thing to watch was an agent carrying away his hard drive, the one containing nearly 1,000 bitcoins. Default blacked out. Kraka was arrested as well. British police raided his home and confiscated all of his computers. Another member of Kraka's with attitude was arrested in the United States, while 3 more were arrested in the United Kingdom. Because Kraka was a minor living in Britain, he received a relatively lenient sentence. He spent 2 years in a juvenile detention center. He became the first juvenile in the United Kingdom to be imprisoned for hacking. Today, he says he's left that life behind. His goal is simply to build a career in cybersecurity and move on. Default, despite playing a smaller role in the overall operation, paid a much heavier price. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. He was also ordered to pay $145,000 in restitution. Because of COVID restrictions, he spent much of that sentence in solitary confinement. Speaking before the court, he said, "I believed what I was doing was morally and politically justified, but 2 years later, I realized I was completely wrong." Snowden, of course, paid a heavy price as well. Soon after the leaks, intelligence officials were publicly discussing the possibility of having him killed. Whether you're a principled whistleblower who truly believes the public deserves to know the truth, or just a teenager angry at what you see as injustice, taking on the United States government is a decision that can change the course of your life forever. So make sure it's worth it.